And so like it just drops down below them, and all of a sudden it just like flies to like the side, and it just disappears like in a flash of a second. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Outside of the Box podcast, or outside out of the box podcast, I should say. Today we're super excited. We have a special guest, star guest here with us. It's Ethan, Ethan Adcock. If you want to present yourself, Ethan, let the viewers know who you are.
Yeah, my name's Ethan Adcock. I'm still Adcock's nephew. I've graduated earlier this year, and just it's an honor of mine to be on this podcast with y'all.
We're glad to have you.
Awesome. Glad to have you. And so, Ethan, you graduated just recently from
Victoria West High School. Yep.
Awesome. Congrats for that, man. Yeah.
Finally.
Well, yeah, I know, right?
Yeah.
Out of it now. Well, without further ado, we do have a special topic today also that we're gonna get to share with everyone here on the Zoom call. So we're gonna be talking about aliens and UFOs. So we're excited to see where this takes us. If you have any comments that you would like to share with us, please feel free to drop them down below. We'll reply as soon as we can. But yeah, let's get started. Do you guys have any weird stories about aliens or UFOs, something that's happened personally or family wise?
I wish.
I definitely have ghost stories, but UFOs not so much. I've seen shooting stars and stuff, but
Yeah,
I can't
Like,
say
I've
sure
heard-
if they were UFOs.
Same here.
Yeah.
Like, I've heard stuff from other people. Like, my mom and dad seen like a UFO one
yeah,
time.
my parents. Yeah,
Oh, your parents saw something?
yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah, well, so it was crazy because so I was talking to my dad one time about aliens, and he told me, like, I asked him if he believed in aliens, and he was like, yeah, I do. And I was like, really? Like, what makes you say that? And he's like, he said that one time he was, he lived in Mexico for most of his youth. So he was driving with his family, and it was kind of dark area where he was at, and it was close to like Aztec Mayan kind of style of
Yeah, the old
environment.
ruins.
Yeah, the old ruins, kind of like
Mm.
that area, like out in the outskirts, small town. And he was driving. Well, my grandfather was driving, and he said that all of a sudden in the street, there was this like red, flashing lights, like red thing that just dropped down in the middle of the street.
What?
And my grandfather, like, he was like a pretty strict guy, like was in the Navy, like he was like a tough man, like, he wouldn't believe just anything. And so like it just drops down below them, and all of a sudden it just like flies to like the side, and it just disappears like in a flash of a second. And my dad, he was awake at that time, but it was like dark, and there was no like there wasn't that many what's it called, like street lights. It was like, yeah, it was like out in the outskirts. There wasn't that much, like, it was pretty much like almost, that was a small paved road that they happened to be in. And so my grandfather got off the car because he was like stunned at what he had seen. And there was a guy outside in his porch, and he asked him, like, hey, like, did you see that? And the guy was like, yeah, like I saw that light, those flashing lights. And it's almost like when you're driving out at night, and you put on the brakes, or the car in front of you puts on the brakes, and you see those red lights, but it's just like flashing, like as if it was like a cylinder,
like
almost.
A siren, right? Like a
Yeah,
siren
yeah,
going
like
off.
in circles, like, yeah, you could see like it was flashing in a circular motion. As at least that's what my dad told me. And he said that sometimes when he was outside, because he's, that back then they didn't have internet, so they spent most of their time outside. And he said that sometimes in the sky, you could see like little dots that would move really fast in like almost quadratic motion. And he said that it couldn't have been a helicopter or an airplane. at at that, because it would form, like L's, almost like squares in motion. And
That's so
so he
weird.
said
Yeah.
that there was nothing that could move like that, unless, I mean, the government had something. But he said
Right.
that that was something he would see when he was younger. And I was
Yeah,
like,
so
oh
weird. It's like
man,
a specific pattern almost. So
yeah,
I wanna ask all of y'all, do y'all believe in aliens, and if so, why?
it's a good question.
Who wants to start off?
Ethan, take it off.
Uh, I believe there has to be another species besides us. Like maybe they've gone extinct before us, or they're no longer around, or maybe they're in hiding in another planet, or they're suffering their own, I guess you could say, pandemic or something. But it mind blows me that people believe that we are the only intelligent like species in this whole
Mm,
galaxy, with when like we're finding water on Mars, and underneath the we're finding those great lakes on Mars and stuff. And it just mind blows me, because I mean there's proof that there's water, and they say we're capable to live on Mars. So how are you gonna like, and then also like the history of like the Egyptians with their drawings on the walls, like is that just made up? Like to me, I
yeah,
believe in history, and
Yeah.
it just can't be a coincidence, you know?
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah,
and it
Jose
makes
knows.
you think, like I'm glad that you mentioned that, because a lot of the historical, cultures, they a lot of the things that, or gods that they talked about, came from heaven, and that's the
Mm-hmm.
idea of heaven, you know and maybe they, since they didn't have the technology to fly up into the clouds, like we do now. Now we know, like, there's something more past the clouds, right? There's, the
Yeah.
sky, the stars. And but back then, they thought everything that came from up there must have been another realm, another world, which maybe it is, right? But yeah, I mean, it makes you think, like, well, if older cultures had, these signs and these stories about gods coming from heaven, and expecting things to come from the sky, right? There's
Yeah,
some truth to
worshiping the
it.
sky people, you hear that a lot. They worship sky people back then. And
Yeah,
we don't hear that nowadays because we've conquered the sky. We know what it's like up there and all that. But back then, like you were saying, they weren't as technology advanced as we are to be able to understand that. So I
yeah,
definitely understand what you're saying right there. It makes a lot of sense.
yeah. And even at, like, if and I know human cultures, I guess, they, since we are human, across different continents, you start seeing, like, patterns, like of how, generations have developed. But one of the interesting things is, I was watching a documentary about the Mayan ruins, and there was a lot of areas, where they have almost, things created so like an aircraft could land or take off.
Yeah,
They
I've
have, like,
heard
these
about
ramps,
that. Yeah.
Yeah, was that like the pyramids kind of thing?
Yeah.
yeah.
Well,
So
Is that it?
yeah.
it's like,
Go ahead.
in the Mayan ruins, the temples, they would create, they found some almost like landing,
Platforms. Yeah.
platforms. Yeah, yeah,
Dude, that's weird. That really makes you think.
Well,
Yeah.
and they even talk about now, like if we wanted to replicate the pyramids in Egypt, it'd be almost impossible for us
Right.
to do that. But they're there, so it's not impossible. I mean, someone made
Yeah,
those,
something
but
had to
they
have
say it's impossible for architects nowadays to do it, even though we're so advanced in technology. It just mind blows
That
me.
is really weird.
yeah,
Were you talking about it too, Jose? Like I think I remember you saying like lifting those bricks to the top.
yeah,
Like,
yeah. And it, like, back then we didn't have the technology necessary to carry boulders with that, to carry them at such a distance, and put them in a
Mm-hmm.
specific spot, that just, not even like a couple men, could carry those big chunks of rock. And so, it makes you think, like, well, maybe they had help from other beings, other beings that can move these rocks, or had the technology to move them in some sort. And that's why they were creating these sanctuaries, I guess, in a way, for aliens, to help them in the process, or so that they would come continue to share knowledge and things of that sort. But I think as as we progressed as a species, we realized, or maybe aliens realized something within us that they couldn't have contact with us anymore, or maybe we still continue to have contact with them, but we just don't know about it.
Yeah, the higher powers. I
Right.
actually heard a theory about to where if the pyramids were man made, for them to be able to move boulders that size up there, it would have to have such a significant ramp with such a slow increase over time, for them to
Mm,
be able to push it up there. But with those significant ramps, there would still be evidence of them till this day. But think about it. We don't see no ramps anywhere.
yeah.
We don't see none of that. It's all we see is 3 pyramids. And then in Mars, they say that there's pyramids of Mars as well that align with ours at certain
Mm,
times of the orbit. Like some at certain times in orbit, our pyramids here on Earth and the one in Mars, they actually align, which if that's true, that's
That is
insane to believe.
yeah.
crazy.
And
That'd be a
it
weird
makes
coincidence. Yeah.
it makes me think. Well, like I was watching a another documentary, and said, these pyramids that are being constructed, they have such a way of being built that it's almost similar in how they are constructed. So, before we didn't have ships to carry us into water, or
Mm-hmm.
across continents. And
Yeah,
so we're getting the same buildings, the same architecture, to some degree. And it's interesting because how where they were positioned in the earth, in itself, has a lot of connections with energy. And what they were thinking is that these pyramids were constructed in a way to carry almost like an internet connection where you can
I've heard
transport
that, like
messages,
signals back and forth. Yes, I've
signals.
heard
Yeah.
that.
Huh.
Yeah, I actually have heard about that.
So
Which
even
that's very interesting. Like, think about how were they able to communicate back then? Because we've heard about the different times of travel. It took a long time for them to travel from continent to continent. But like you were saying, the way they're constructed is so similar that they believe they have to be connected. But the only evidence for that is the structures themselves. We don't have any evidence that actually proves that they're connected. So
yeah.
That's the hard part, and that's actually want to play devil's advocate because y'all were saying some stuff, and I was thinking, man, but what if? So my question, I guess, to y'all is like, could they have created? Because we often think that people back then weren't as intelligent as we are now, but the reality is, civilization has always had some level of intelligence. There's always been intelligent people across history, like Plato, Aristotle, and then you can
Leonardo da Vinci.
Leonardo da Vinci,
Yeah.
Einstein, each like century. So I'm like, if civilization has always been somewhat intelligent, who's to say they didn't build complicated crane systems or pulley systems to be able to move those really heavy bricks?
See, my question to you about that is, there would still be evidence of those. What
But
is the evidence of them?
yeah, I
Like
was
if
thinking
a
about that
big
too.
crane,
I was thinking about that
like
too because you mentioned that earlier, and I was like, well, what if the cranes are made of wood and string, and those would deteriorate like that, like hundreds of thousands of years later, those would
yeah,
be.
but think about fossilized wood. We find that all the time. Wouldn't it just
Yeah.
fossilize over time?
The thing about fossilization is it only happens under very certain circumstances. So if it,
Mm-hmm.
if it doesn't get fossilized at a certain time period, it's gonna never be fossilized and it'll be destroyed and deteriorated. But yeah, no, like I definitely, well, on that note, I believe in aliens because I believe the universe is too big to not have other life. But
Mm-hmm.
I was just thinking about that. I was like, you know,
Well, another thing is I've also heard that Egypt at one point was not always a sandy, dry desert. It was actually very lush, green, and very nutrients with water and stuff. And over time, it eventually dried up and become desert. But say it was full of water, lush, green land, and all that. Wouldn't the like say the crane, for instance, say they had a big crane over, it'd fall down, and that's how fossilization works even over here. So wouldn't it be buried under the sand over time? Like, wouldn't a lot of that evidence be there, like underneath the sand? Like, my question is, how much do they actually look underneath the sand areas around the pyramids. Because,
Yeah.
you know, they always say they find like a new tomb or something here and there. My question is, how deep and how far around? Like, what is the area they're actually looking at under the sand,
Yeah,
you
and I
know?
think it's a really good question, and like I want to actually look into it because like I don't know, that would be yeah, it makes you think. What do you think I'll say?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, it's interesting because kind of like what Ethan was saying. There hasn't been any evidence into how these pyramids were constructed. I mean, it still lies as a mystery to a lot of people today, and we live in the 21st century. I mean, it's kind of crazy that at this point with the technology that we have, we still haven't been able to figure out how exactly these were created. And so the precision of how they were calculated and placed in place, and how smooth they are in top of
Mm-hmm.
course there's been erosion and all that, but you know how they there was no way to cut, back then, a rock that big.
That,
you
yeah,
know
that size, you
how
know?
can you
Yeah, that
cut
is
a rock and leave it, precise with the right measurements? And that's to
Because
do the whole thing that, that would have taken ages
yeah,
for
like
them.
you said, I've heard this thing, like I believe it was, there's no such thing as right angles in like the natural environment, you know, like there's no right angles. But if you go look at those bricks, every single one of them has perfect right angles and they're built up. And then they even went underground with the tombs. Like, how are they able to construct this huge, massive pit of
They have
tombs
to
and stuff
like cave.
underground?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then build on top of it with these massive stones. It's just mind blowing that they couldn't have done it by themselves. And like you said, you know, we have all the technology nowadays. We can figure out most things, but instead we're too busy worried about traveling off our planet to go learn about other stuff instead of solving problems on our planet. Like, we we can easily figure that out if we all band together with the resources, technology, and money. Or maybe we can't figure it out. Maybe it was by another species that helped us, but I believe like if we put more effort into figuring it out, we could have a better understanding of it, you know?
I agree, dude. It really makes you think. Like, it's such a complicated question because there's so many ways to look at it. Hey, have y'all heard about this report the FBI released about UFOs?
Yeah, I've heard
I,
about parts of it.
I know you mentioned it, but I haven't read it.
Yeah, June 25th.
Oh, my birthday.
I think it said it was mostly inconclusive, right, Ethan? Because you said you kind of
Yeah. It's because like a lot of people, like even Neil deGrasse Tyson and all that. I mean, I get where they come from the science community of question everything until proven wrong, but you know, a lot of it's not explainable for the technology we're at now. Like, some would say like this is too advanced for our civilization, which I mean,
yeah,
how much do we actually know that we're being told is true, you know?
exactly. Yeah, so like right here it says in 18 incidents they saw unusual UAP, which UAP is the new term for UFO now. They saw unusual movement patterns of these UFOs and flight characteristics, I guess, that they couldn't explain. So at least 18. That's pretty weird.
Yeah. And I don't doubt there's way more than 18.
Yeah.
These are
Oh
just
yeah.
18 that are reported, you
Yeah,
know?
because let's see, that was yeah, it said somewhere like it was a time period of like it wasn't like the whole history of mankind. It was a limited time frame, but yeah, it's weird, right? Like, I
And I
was
wonder how far it goes back to like the first report of a UFO, you know?
yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
when was the first one
Actually,
reported?
I'm glad you mentioned because I actually read a book from the library over the summer. I forgot the name of it, but it says something like as early back as like George Washington like saw a UFO, and
And
Abraham Lincoln saw a UFO. So it's like
really? I've
pretty
never
sure,
heard of that.
pretty sure. I almost want to fact check myself but I know it was in those times that people claimed to see UFOs.
Did you hear about the thing about the Mona Lisa has a UFO in the background?
Oh, really?
Oh,
I don't know.
Have y'all
really?
heard about that?
No,
I
I
don't know
never
if it's
heard of it.
100% true, but I've heard of it. But if that's true, that's almost mind blowing that it's on the Mona Lisa, you know, and that's from
Yeah.
way back when.
Yeah, dude, that's weird. Man.
Dang,
So yeah,
that's
Leonardo da
crazy.
Vinci put in his art. It was on the Wasn't it in like cave paintings too? Like I know it was in the hieroglyphics at one point, right?
Yeah, and the pyramids, they have signs of UFOs and stuff in the pyramids and like big alien species compared to humans in there.
Yeah.
And it makes me think like, there's certain areas in the world, for example, how we were talking about still last time, the what if aliens are living in the oceans, in our oceans,
Yeah, in the
and
deepest
Yeah.
parts.
in the deep
Yeah.
Yeah,
hearts of our
yeah.
oceans, maybe the
We haven't
the
discovered
the
everything.
the triangle, the Bermuda Triangle, maybe
Yeah.
it's a magnet there, or
Yeah,
they're
the
living there so that
electromagnetic
human
field.
beings can't like come in,
Yeah.
and so it makes you think like, why a triangle? A pyramid is a triangle, like there's a lot of connections,
Yeah, I never made that
geometrically.
connection. Yeah, that it's
That's
a
true.
triangle. The pyramids are triangles. But then again, like I've heard a question of why is there an electromagnetic field right there, off the coast of Florida? Like it makes no sense of
Mm.
that specific area on why it has, that electromagnetic field there and why all those crazy things happen there, It makes no sense. But who says they've explored everything there,
Yeah, it's true. Well, so what are y'all final thoughts as we wrap up this podcast?
I just think like, they are real for sure, and if anything, I think maybe in a few years we might all be able to have contact with these aliens, and hopefully maybe they can help us solve many of our world problems that we have. I think they might be waiting for the right time to make that connection again with us, and hopefully it's we can react peacefully to that interaction.
Yeah, I often wonder if society's ready or not. That's a good question too.
Yeah.
That
What
is a good
about you?
question.
Any final thoughts, Ethan?
To me, there's just way too much evidence for them to be there, for them not to be there, because I'm a dude who looks at the evidence, the data, what's there. Like, I believe what I can see, and there's just too many things that are unexplainable and that has been said that cannot be done by man for me to believe that they don't exist. I do believe because they say man can't make some of these things. So obviously someone else had to make them. So that's what I believe. Definitely they're real.
Well, thank you everyone for listening in today. We appreciate. Thank you, Ethan, for coming in with this episode of aliens, and seeing if what our thoughts are in regards to them being real. If you guys have any questions, if you guys have any comments as well, any interesting facts that you yourself have found, please leave them down below. We're trying to create an awesome community so we can share more information about what's going on in our world, and all these outside of box topics. But until next time, we will see you soon. Take care.